Happy Halloween, listeners! Have we got a treat for you today on what is most definitely Jen's favorite holiday? Jen is talking to Brian J. Cano, a paranormal researcher, lecturer, and author, as well as being featured on the Travel Channel, History Channel, and Sci-Fi Channel. Jen is going to talk with Brian about some of the spooky finds on the haunted history trail of New York State, including spots right here in the Hudson Valley. And of course, our Valley Girl correspondents, Rebecca and Danielle, will be sharing some fun and mysterious places to check out this Halloween. So stay with us and keep your ears open for something new on this episode of Valley Girls Podcast. Hello and welcome to Valley Girls, the bi-weekly podcast exploring everything there is to see, do, try, eat, and experience in New York's Hudson Valley by talking to the makers, the doers, the growers, the creators, and all the unique voices of the Hudson Valley. I'm Jenny Leifer.
And I'm Jennifer Santiago, and together as the Valley Girls, we're telling the Hudson Valley story one episode at a time. We're so happy you're here.
You might have noticed that our regular theme song, Painting a Vast Blue Sky by Robert Burke Warren, has been replaced for our very special and very spooky Halloween episode. Please enjoy the original composition, aptly titled Sinister, by violinist Jonathan Joel. We'll link to the song and to our interview with Jonathan on YouTube in the show notes and on the episode page at valleygirlspodcast.com.
Well, hello, and happy Halloween.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's 'tis the season, isn't it?
It is my favorite season. It's always Halloween in my heart. But today really is Halloween, and I am so excited to be here talking to Brian J. Cano, who is a paranormal investigator and author, a television personality whom you might recognize from, among other things, the Travel Channel show Paranormal Caught on Camera. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So the way that I found you specifically with regards to the Hudson Valley is through this beautiful guide that I will give everybody a link to. Yes, the Haunted History Trail of New York State. And if you go on their website, you can request this. They will mail it to you for free. It's a beautiful guide. And it's so exciting because this is the kind of stuff I love. So first of all, you, in the introduction to this guide, you talk about growing up in Staten Island and being that kid who wanted to go investigate all the creepy places all the time. This is unrelated to what we're talking about, but I have to ask you, have you read the N.K. Jemisin duology, The City We Became and the World We Make?
I have not gotten to that one yet, no.
All right. So I love her. She's like sci-fi fantasy for anybody who doesn't know, but The City We Became is all about the 5 boroughs of New York City. And without giving too much away, there are people who become basically avatars of each of the boroughs. And there is so much good Staten Island stuff in there. So whenever anybody says Staten Island now, I automatically think of that book series. I love that book series. I hope that you read it.
That's a great change because usually people say Staten Island and the worst examples come forward. So yes,
Okay.
let's roll with that.
Well, so she taps into the stereotypes about Staten Island, but it ends up becoming really great. I think you'll like it. I hope you read it and come back.
Okay.
Also, you are the author of a book that came out, I think, 2 years ago that is called Grains of Sand, right? Tell me a
Yes.
little bit about your book, because I didn't tell you this yet, but our other show is a video series called Literary Hudson Valley. And so maybe you'll come back and we'll talk all about the book.
Yeah, that sounds great. Grains of Sand, I want to say, was 50 years in the making. Pretty much it's a tale of things that I've been through in my life. And it's called Grains of Sand because when I first started down this road of paranormal research, I came into it as a skeptic. I didn't believe in anything. Now, that was a stark contrast to when I was a child. And as a child, you believe in everything.
Yes.
There's no reason not to. As you get older, you become opinionated, you get skeptical, life beats you down. And in college, I found myself very much in a crisis of faith.
Hmm.
I was raised Catholic. And when you're in college, you think you know everything. So I approached the topic with, instead of my boyhood wonder, I looked at it and I said, yeah, people are crazy. Oh, you're seeing ghosts? Sure you are. Oh, you saw your grandmother? Of course you did. And it was my thought to, all right, I'm going to be the guy who finds the rational, logical explanation for these phenomena. And it's probably something very simple. And as I went on, I researched, went on cases, got mentored, started a group, went to conventions, went to all these different places that I was hoping would convince me, would flip that skeptic switch off to
Mm.
believer. And each of those experiences was like a grain of sand. Here, I
Mm.
give you a grain of sand. You look at it, you're like, that's it? This isn't very convincing at all. And I would drop it at my feet. Each experience was another grain, another grain, another grain, and each one failed to convince me. But over time, over the years, I eventually looked down at my feet, and metaphorically speaking, all those grains I had dropped
Mm-hmm.
formed a beach that I was standing on, and I
Oh,
had to consider what that meant. So these days, I consider myself to be a skeptical believer. Know the
interesting.
phenomena exists.
Yes.
It's the people who report it that
Mm-hmm.
I'm skeptical of.
And there frequently is a rational, non paranormal explanation for things, but sometimes just because we don't understand it yet doesn't mean it's not something that exists that we might find out about later on. So I like your evolution from as a kid being Mulder and then as a teenager and young man being Scully, and then now you're kind of Mulder again.
Well, on the X-Files, I mean, if you notice on the X-Files, they set you up with that. They set you
Mm-hmm.
up, okay, Mulder's the believer, Scully's the skeptic. She was
Yep.
assigned to him to debunk his cases,
Yeah.
and half the time she was the one who kept getting hit with the activity.
Yep.
She would encounter something. She would get kidnapped every other episode. She was abducted.
Yep. I knew you'd get that because we're both Gen Xers, so I knew I could talk X Files with you. So before we get into all of my many questions, I wanted to clear up my unintentional misinformation. I perhaps overcredited you in our press release and our season preview, where I said that you created the guide to the New York Haunted History Trail, and you were very careful to say, I didn't create it. There's other folks that did a whole lot of work on that. So tell me about how the Haunted History Trail came about and what exactly your involvement with it is.
The genesis of the Haunted History Trail, it comes down to the sole brainchild of one person up in Genesee County, New York, and that would be Kelly Rapone. In addition to working out at the tourism board up in Genesee County, she had this idea that she wanted to have this haunted history trail. She loved the paranormal, and in her work, she felt, okay, I have the connections and the contacts to try to liaise with all the counties of New York State. And there's a lot of places. Some are famous, some are infamous, and some people don't know about yet.
Hmm.
And she took it upon herself to craft this literal trail that people could go along and visit. And I'm not sure how many years it's been going. I want to say 7, 8, 9. We're probably coming up on maybe 10 years at this point, but
Nice.
it started small, started to grow, and I've known about it the entire time. Anytime we would come across each other, I'm like, hey, how's the trail going? She's like, oh, it's going great. I said, I love this idea. How can I help? We were always figuring out how to fit me in, how to fit me in. And then several years ago, she said, hey, we finally have a little bit of budget. We've got an idea. Why don't you be the ambassador? I said, I would love to be the ambassador. I'm a New
Nice.
Yorker, so there's no one better to represent the Empire State than me.
That's right.
Because, there's obviously more famous people, but they've got Rhode Island. They can have Rhode Island. New York is mine.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, and thank you, Kelly, because you sound like my kind of girl. We should hang out. Let's go see some haunted places together. So I love that. And the guide is great because you cover really so much of the state. And the guide is, from somebody who gets it, it's broken down into regions so you can look and see what's close to you. And we here on Valley Girls are very Catskills and Hudson Valley specific. And I was very proud that we got 3 whole pages dedicated just to us. So there's some really cool Catskill and Hudson Valley areas. What do you think is a highlight? If we only have time or the stomach for one of these Catskills or Hudson Valley getaways, where are we going to get the most bang for our buck in terms of creepiness? So I've always wanted to go to the Pine Bush UFO Museum. But I feel like that's a different sort of thing. Look, UFOs are evergreen. So if we really want some Halloweeny vibes, what do you think?
Oof, this is tough. I'm bad with favorite questions. If someone says, "What's your favorite song? Your favorite movie? What's your favorite food?" I'm like, "Oh, there's too many good ones to choose from." And even though you're eliminating most of the state and saying, "All right, Hudson Valley," we still have several great options. Like just going down the list, the Burnbrae Mansion, very cool. They've got this amazing. Well, you can stay there as a bed and breakfast, and it is. I want to say it's in a good way, it's schizophrenic in that it has many different identities within the house. The gentleman who owns it used to be a trainer in the Olympics, I think, for running
Yeah.
or something. So there's an entire room dedicated to that. The medals, the people he trained, the jerseys, lots to do with sports. And then there's other areas of the mansion that are dedicated to local things. But then you go upstairs to the attic, and this is something out of a movie where there's thousands of. I felt like I was in John Zaffis's Museum of the Paranormal when I went up there because I'm like, oh my God, is this where the gremlins came from? What's what is this? So that's an interesting place to go. It's also in a beautiful part of the state.
Nice.
The Shanley Hotel usually gets all the fame and the credit, and yet on the national scale, it's still considered very small. And only several years ago did Napanoch, New York, get a Walmart. So therefore now it's a bustling 2 blocks of a metropolis.
They got a second stoplight, huh?
They have two now. And the Shanley Hotel I've been to many, many times.
The Shanley Hotel immediately sounds terrifying because it makes you think of the Stanley Hotel, which is
It's very
obviously,
easily confusable, but definitely not the same.
yeah. That's very
There's
cool. Have you slept over at these places?
Oh yes, oh
Okay.
of course.
All right. All right.
I've Sad thing especially when it comes to places like the Shanley. I used to go there a lot under the old management, Sal Nicosia before he passed. It was more like going to see an uncle or a grandfather, just less about the paranormal and more about the human connections that were made.
It's really nice. But also, maybe you get a little paranormal bonus. So
You get both.
yeah.
And that's the thing, like, all right, on the trail, as the ambassador, I travel the states, going to the different locations to experience them for myself so that I can better represent the trail.
Mhm.
I also have to film content for the trail's TikTok channel, so I'm also editing the videos that are posted. And each place I go to, I meet these great people. And I feel like these are important things. The paranormal, yes, it's about what happens to us when we die, what comes next, does the soul survive? But we're here now. Let's make these connections with the living. And the paranormal is often very much about community. Um, I went to a big convention at the end of August called Michigan Paracon, and it's like the mecca of the paranormal. Everyone is there. And these days, it's less about the lectures and less about the uh, vendor room or the talks. And it's more about, hey, these are all my people. Everyone is here. It's a big family reunion.
That's very cool. And so, yes, I think part of the fascination is, what happens after this life that we know of? Do we continue on? Do our souls continue? But also, you said when you were talking about being a little kid, you said that sense of wonder. And so I still think that there's some really essential part of human connection where we can still speculate about things that we may never understand, that there's no way to prove or disprove, that maybe we just want to believe in because we like a little whimsy. We like magic. We need to believe certain things to feel okay about where we are in life. So I definitely think it's a very basic part of human connection. So, and I think that people who like paranormal stuff are always the best people.
Well, it's definitely about choice. It comes down to free will. We choose to believe in smart men in white coats that say, don't eat this, it'll give you cancer. We choose to believe in robed men with funny hats that say, oh, you're going to go to heaven or you're going to go to hell. Believe this. We believe either in emptiness or everything. And very few of us actually do the research ourselves to find out, well, is this true? No, we're putting our faith in things.
Mm.
So the paranormal brought me from that place of skepticism and spiritual conflict and brought me back to some of that wonder. So
Mm.
it really brought me back into a place where, hey, almost anything is possible. The world is an amazing place, not just the commute and taxes, and
Yep.
sometimes this world beats us down.
Yeah. All right. So I am a somewhat of an amateur psychologist. Well, not amateur. I have a master's degree in psychology, but I'm not a clinical psychology practitioner. But how much of these experiences, of which you've had a lot and you've talked to many people who have had experiences, how much confirmation bias do you think there is? Like, we see magic because we want to see magic. We experience a haunting because we want to. We believe in it. So, do you think that do you think that plays into it? Or have you met a lot of skeptics on your journey who said, I don't believe in any of this stuff, but I'm telling you this happened to me?
It's funny you say that because yes, well, confirmation bias is definitely a thing. Cognitive dissonance, the human brain just does not is not okay with it, so you're going to fill in those blanks.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it is a self-fulfilling prophecy in that if you go to said place and expecting X, Y, and Z to happen, most likely you will find a way to make that happen, unless you are a staunch skeptic, blinders on, not wanting to accept, and you could have Jesus himself come up and shake your hand, and you'll be like, nope, nope, not gonna believe it. Um, and it's funny because I used to be a skeptic, so I can understand. But that being said, I am no longer comfortable, and I tell people, if you are skeptical, that's great. Be skeptical. It's an important thing to have because the opposite of that is naivete, and you don't want to be naive.
Right.
But to take on the mantle of skeptic, you're doing yourself a disservice. And just I've been doing ghost tours up in Lake George at
Mm.
Fort William Henry.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I want to talk
after
about that one coming up because I bet there's a lot that goes on up there.
after one of the tours, this older gentleman comes up to me. He was 81. He goes, "Oh, well, I'm 81 years old, and I got to tell you, after all the hogwash you just told me," and his wife is like, "Oh, don't say that." He tells me that I was presenting hogwash, but then he tells a 25-minute story about this thing that happened in his house that he can't explain and how haunted it is. I'm like, wait a minute, whoa, whoa, whoa. And like you said, so many people, and that's the thing. I don't think it's that they don't believe, but they're afraid to believe.
Sure.
They're scared to say, all right, what if? Because you might be wrong and they don't want to be wrong. They want to pick a side, and it's easier to say no or I deny than to say maybe and I can't prove it, but let's talk. And it makes me think very much of acting and improv.
Hmm.
We're giving people the yes and
Yes.
they're giving
And
the no and
yeah.
shutting down the scene. It's like,
Yeah.
all right, well, now the scene's over. Thanks for that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it is scary to be open to the unknown, especially when you've always thought a certain way. So I get that. But all right. So let's talk about the kind of experiences people have. And so I watch all these shows, I read all these books, but other people might be like, what are you talking about? Like, did you get haunted? Did a ghost swoop over you? So, for example, there's one here in the guide, Silvio's Villa in South Warwick. And one of the things that you say people have experienced are EVPs. Can you tell people who are not obsessed with this stuff like I am what an EVP is and some of the other ways that you might experience phenomena?
EVP stands for electronic voice phenomenon. It's essentially the capturing of spirit voices or just voices that weren't your own or weren't present in the room when you were doing the recording. This was first discovered back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. One notable figure, his name was Frederick Jurgensen, and he was a Swiss opera singer, but he also had a hobby of recording bird song. And one day he was in his garden recording bird song, and when he played it back, when he was listening to it, he heard a voice going, "Freddie, Freddie, Freddie," in his mother's voice. That was the nickname for him, and she had been deceased for some time. So this sparked an interest in what we now call EVP. And especially with Silvio's Villa, I've been there many times, and again, I'm friends with the owner. We went there, we filmed for Haunted Collector. back in the day, and we had quite an adventure. And some things were debunked, and some things just remain a mystery. So, in a place like that, which is a restaurant, and people are coming and going, sharing their experiences, sharing a meal, sharing an experience,
Hmm.
this can leave behind some energy. So remember, you go to a place like that and you have celebrations. So there's positive energy. And but then sometimes you go to a dinner and people break up, or maybe they're there because they just went to a funeral and everyone's very sad. So emotional states can leave behind little bits of energy. And maybe by itself, it's not enough to spark a haunting. But in a place like that, where people are coming and coming and coming, depositing little bits. And again, they're depositing their own grains of sand that eventually amount up to something larger that manifests.
Hmm. I don't know if that's at your house or my house, and I don't know if the recording will pick it up, but there's just a crow cawing, and it's so like on brand for our Halloween episode.
That's your Poe bust. He's rapping at the chamber door.
Nevermore. Okay, so this is all very exciting. So the next section of the guide is Saratoga and Lake George area, which is very accessible for those of us here in the Hudson Valley. You specifically talked about Fort William Henry. So tell us a little bit more about that. You were just talking about with the restaurant, you're talking about the traces of energy that are left behind by lots of intense emotions, whether they're positive or negative. So a fort that figured prominently in the Revolutionary War,
French and Indian War.
French and Indian War. All right, so that's gonna have some traces of history there. So tell us a little bit about that site.
Oh, Fort William Henry. Ironically enough, it's smack dab in the middle of a vacation town. People are parasailing, people are riding bikes, people are enjoying their summer. And there's this imposing fortress from the French and Indian War. It was built by the British in 1755, became operational, and it was there to pretty much say, all right, this is our land, we're here now. Encamped on both sides were the French, some Canadians, because it was New France at the time, and their Native American allies, or rather hired guns. Pretty much the Native Americans like, all right, we have two camps of white people here that we didn't invite. We gotta pick a side, and either way, we gotta get them out. The fort only stood for 2 years, and I learned this having been attached there and doing the tours. You know, when you go to a place and you see a fort, usually it's Revolutionary War, or when you go over into Europe, it's World War I, World War II, and you assume they built it and it's been there since. You look around and say, wow, what a great job of preservation they're doing. But Fort William Henry was burned down in 1757. It only stood for 2 years. The French attacked, invaded, many brutal murders. They call it not only the siege, but they call it the massacre, because during the war, the French employed the Native Americans to say, all right, you know what, we are gentlemen, we have to fight civilized, but you can do what we're not allowed to do.
Yeah,
Go kill. And how did they prove their kills? They were being paid per kill. Common proof of this is the scalp, or worse. That's not the only thing they would cut off. We'll leave it at that.
Oh.
Yeah. So they would go down, and especially they would go down to a place like the infirmary where those guys aren't fighting back. And just it was a bloodbath. That energy, that fear. Now, think about at the time, 1755, who were the British soldiers there? They weren't veterans of wars. They were 17-year-old kids shipped off to the new worlds. You know, barely know where to defend or why they're here, and they're so far from home. A lot of confusion, a lot of frustration and fear, anger, sudden death. Once the place got burned down, it stayed abandoned for almost 200 years. And then in the 1950s, interest in the war and history and preservation made them rebuild it. They built it back up again. It burned down one more time 10 years later due to mysterious circumstances. It's back again. It's beautiful. You look at it, and again, you would assume this has been here since the 1700s. Their level of preservation is great. So their tours tell you a lot about the history. Their ghost tours at night go into some of the stories about who they've seen, what's there, like a little girl up on the parapets. Uh, Another voice that's heard audibly, that when you go into the arsenal where the ammunition was kept, when you leave, a voice will say, "Oh, good night." And if you're polite, or if you say, "Oh, good night," you'll get a response.
Very
In
cordial.
addition to that, down in the casemate, there's tales of this Native American spirit. He refuses to really make too much contact, but if you are disrespectful, yes, he's going to make some serious contact.
Well, good for him. So, okay. It's funny that we're talking about Lake George because the reason that my co-host Jenny is not here with us today, besides being a scaredy cat, is because she's actually in Lake George right now with her kids. So for other people like Jenny who are not into this stuff the way we are, what are some of the sites, and it can be in any of the regions of New York, do you have a couple recommendations of sites that are heavy on the history and lighter on the haunted, so it can be, maybe more kid friendly if you don't want to take your kids to a place that's more eerie?
Well, of the tours that I did at Fort William Henry, you would get families that had several kids, and you would have some of the kids like, "Ooh, I can't wait," and the other one hiding behind their parents, scared to even look out from behind them. So I think there's lots of different choices. And on the trail, you've got a lot of bed and breakfasts. You've got a lot of museums where, unfortunately, sometimes the average citizen would be like, "Oh, it's just a bunch of old stuff in a building." But sometimes the things they collect, the areas of the country and the world, and the events that they're from, yeah, if you really want to go and get into that, it might seem like moldy old history, but it's our history, so it's amazing to look into. So yes, the kids will be bored there, but take them to a fort, take them to uh the Western Block out near Buffalo, take them to Rolling Hills Mental Asylum, and they'll have a scare all year, not just Halloween.
Yeah. What about the mystery spot of Lake George? I never heard about this until I got this guide, and it sounds intriguing.
It's funny because I have been, and this is going to spark all sorts of jokes. I've been searching for that spot for some time and have been unable to find it. I was able to locate it this summer, and half the reason is you asked the locals. I said, "Hey, where's this Lake George mystery spot?" Because so many of the workers are not necessarily from there. They're seasonal hires.
Right,
They
right.
look at you, shrug, and go, "I don't know what you're talking about." So I was always unable to find it. And then finally, I came back to film for the trail, and it was right after this big biker event. And there was a big stage erected on where it was supposed to be. I'm like, "Oh, I can't see it now."
Ooh.
So back in August, when I was doing tours, it was clear. I found it. You stand in the middle of this mystery spot. It's right by the visitor center. And if you face the lake, it sounds like you're speaking through like a bullhorn or a cone. You hear it. It's almost as if you're wearing headphones and talking through a loudspeaker. It
Hmm.
just echo. It's almost like doubled or tripled your
Right.
voice. It sounds amazing.
Huh. That's very interesting. I mean, I wonder what the explanation is for that, because it makes me think of when you do it in the hallway at Grand Central outside the Oyster Bar, where you turn to one corner and whisper, and then I turn to the other corner and whisper. We hear each other across the thing, but there's no structure there that would account for that, right?
Well, it's definitely a science can explain it. It's all acoustics, but in the legend, they say that it was a Native American god that he spoke to
Mm.
the land, and this is the spot that he did it. So it still has a remnant of that magic, that divinity,
Huh.
and it's cool because if you don't know it's there, see people sitting there tying their shoes or eating some ice cream. And I'm like, "Hey, guys, you got to come over here and try it." And it is literally a specific spot
Hmm.
that one step to the left, one step to the right, you're out.
Yeah, I like that.
We've got more coming up with Brian Cano. But first, let's hear what activities Rebecca and Danielle are scaring up for us in the Capital Region and Westchester County.
Hello, and welcome to A Capital Idea with Rebecca Ash. This week we highlight the Cohoes Music Hall and the legend of Eva Tangway. As a Cohoes native, and performer, the Cohoes Music Hall has always held a particular fascination for me. It was commissioned in 1874 by two local businessmen, William Atchison and James Maston, who financed it for a staggering $60,000. That's $1,656,821.05 by today's standards. It was designed for retail shops on the first floor, offices on the second, and a 475-seat music hall on the third and fourth floors. After leasing the first floor in 1882, the National Bank of Cohoes would take ownership of the building in 1905 and retain it until 1936, when years of financial troubles would see it closed. It remained shuttered for over 60 years and then was purchased by the city of Cohoes for $1. After fundraising over $1 million for its restoration, it was reopened on March 7, 1975, just over 100 years after it was built, and a year after I was born. It remains the fourth oldest operational music hall in the country. Back in the day, it saw the likes of performers such as Buffalo Bill Cody, John Philip Sousa, P.T. Barnum's Baby Elephant Hunky Punky, General Tom Thumb, and Cohoes native La Petite Adelaide. But it is vaudeville sensation Eva Tanguay that is said to haunt the Cohoes Music Hall to this day. Born in 1878 and known as the Queen of Vaudeville, she performed with various theater troupes throughout the Northeast. It was not only her undeniable talent as a performer that catapulted her into renown, but also a plucky personality. In true vaudeville fashion, she would shock and delight audiences with her bawdy humor, even commissioning a dress made out of the newly minted Lincoln pennies, which she proceeded to pluck off her garment and toss to the men in the audience. And as a burlesque performer myself, this tickles me to no end. It's dubiously rumored that her very first performance at the Cohoes Music Hall saw her booed off the stage, but later appearances at the music hall were unquestionably met with positive reviews and ovations, such as one heralded performance in October of 1894. She would go on to become the highest paid vaudeville star of her day. Diminishing popularity of the art form, however, coupled with the disastrous stock market crash, robbed her of her fortune and her livelihood. She retired to Hollywood, California to quietly live out her days until her death in 1947 at the age of 68. But her electric personality and zest for mischief is said to remain in the Cohoes Music Hall, where cast, crew, and audience members alike claim to have encountered her ghost. Spectral Eva is known to play pranks backstage and has even come through on EVP recordings. Whether it's missing props, the scent of perfume in the air, ghostly giggling, or doors creaking open on their own, it would seem that Eva is still creating a stir and making her presence known. And with all the fabulous shows and events going on at Cohoes Music Hall, why not go down and try and catch her longest-running act for yourself, if you dare. Cohoes Music Hall is located, with or without Eva, at 58 Remsen Street in Cohoes.
Upstate real estate can be scary. Thanks to Craig Muse Miller for sponsoring this episode. Craig is a real estate broker with the Trust Group based in Caro. Craig strives to match every buyer with a house that's truly meant for them, so he takes a holistic approach to house hunting. He has a deep network of local connections to facilitate every stage of the buying process. He's knowledgeable and fearless, so if this episode has you in the mood for a haunted house, Craig will help you find one. If you prefer properties that are definitely, probably not haunted, he can do that too. Upstate real estate doesn't have to be scary. Find Craig on Instagram at Craig on the Catskills, where he shares fun, aspirational, and inspirational real estate content.
Welcome back to the 4-in-1 of Westchester. I'm Danielle Davidson, owner of Main Street Business Strategies, and today I'm providing a ghoul-proof, sorry for the pun, guide for Halloween night in the river towns. First, let's talk about giving yourself a base before the night of festivities commence. Here are my recommendations for places to grab some grub across the villages. First, for my parents with young kids, nothing is better than pizza before trick-or-treating. My recommendation is to order in some pies from Lombardo's in Dobbs Ferry. Pro tip is to order the grandma pie. It's thin and crusty and delicious. Or the parlor in Dobbs Ferry, also really amazing. For those enjoying a kids-free Halloween night, head to Club Car Grill in Irvington for cocktails and good food. They typically have seasonal drink specials, which is always a good time. and they always play the food heads. From pasta to seafood and steaks, I'd recommend reserving your table in advance because it does get pretty busy in there. Once all bellies are filled, head to Phelps Manor in Sleepy Hollow for the ultimate trick-or-treating adventure. This neighborhood is straight out of the movies on Halloween night. Wide streets, kids running amok, and exceptional Halloween decorations. Alternatively, for my thrill-seeking folks, you can grab tickets to the Murder and Mayhem walking tour in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. Head to visitsleepyhollow.com for tickets. Last but not least, you can head to downtown Irvington, experience their annual Halloween band crawl starting at 5 p.m. Bands line the streets and play from the residences' front porches for all trick-or-treaters and passersby, and it's a really, really good time. It's a fun night across the river towns, and it's usually really busy, so plan accordingly. Happy Halloween, and I'll see you out there.
So there's one place on here that you talk about, the Bark Eater Chocolates in North Creek, New York. And so the guide description mentions that since 2013, the property has had a lot of unexplained phenomena. So probably like most people, well, and also I read a lot of like old Gothic novels, but you think that ghosts or hauntings, they're tragic brides who were jilted out the altar and threw themselves in the lake, and now you see them roaming the lakeside in their Victorian gown, or you think of the soldiers from the French and Indian War. So why don't we ever see like ghosts with like iPods and running around? So what would account for this suddenly happening starting in 2013? It's not like a fort that has 300 years of history. So I thought that was really intriguing.
Well, one thing to remember, we live on a haunted planet. Where we are, they are. My house, your house, wherever your friend is in at Lake George. Everywhere that people exist and spend time, they go to work, they live, they play. This is where we're expending energy, and it's going back into the environment. First law of thermodynamics says that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It just changes form. So if any part of that, if there's a sub law that can account for, well, how much of it builds up and can cause a haunting, yes, most of the spirits we see are Victorian, Elizabethan, from this war or that battle or this tragedy. But those are the ones that get the headlines. I mean, today's Halloween, so we're all running around in spooky masks begging for candy. You can get candy 365 days of the year, but why is it so much fun today? It's the same thing with hauntings. Yes, there are average spirits, average ghosts. They don't pull the attention. And nobody complains when grandma comes to visit. You smell her perfume, or, oh, I smell granddad's cigar. Oh, wow. And it makes you think of that connection.
Yeah.
You're not going to call Ghostbusters for that, but it exists. And I've always said in the 22 years that I've been investigating, I've been pushed, pulled, scratched. I've seen shadow forms. I've seen light anomalies, gotten EVP, gotten weird photos, seen partial apparitions, but I have yet to experience a full-bodied apparition, at least that I'm aware of. Because how many times are we walking down a busy city street? We see something, we see someone, we're like, oh, that's weird. You don't know if they're real. You don't know if they're actually there. And I want to have that experience where I go into the fort and I say, hey guys, that nice old man outside just gave me directions to get in there. Like, what do you look like? Oh, he had a big bushy mustache. Oh, that was Jonah. He died in 1972. I have yet to have that.
Yeah. Okay, so you just mentioned phantom smells, which I don't think any of the write-ups in the New York Guide had that, but one of the episodes that I was watching of your show on Travel Channel, Paranormal Caught on Camera, somebody mentioned something about phantom smells, and that is fascinating to me.
Smells, I mean, again, of our senses, sight and hearing are the two big ones. So you hear a sound, you see an anomaly. How many ghosts have you tasted?
Ooh.
How many ghosts have you smelled? And again,
I don't know how many ghosts I've tasted because I don't know what they taste like.
taste is a function of smell. So, okay, those two are combined. So,
Yeah.
okay. I believe, given what I've observed over the years, that again, when you experience that, you smell grandma's perfume, it's not like there's actual particles of perfume in the air that you're bringing in. It's that your brain knows what that smells like. So if the spirit can come and massage that area of the brain, it's like, okay, you can't hear me. You clearly can't see me. I have to let you know I'm here somehow.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's it. Maybe that's the stimulation that your brain is processing and saying, okay, I'm getting input. Where's it coming from?
Yeah.
As far as taste, uh, I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
sometimes you can have a bad taste in your mouth. You're like, no, I taste licorice. I didn't have any of that today.
Huh.
Uh,
Oh, I
tastes
never
like
thought of
chicken.
that.
Ghosts taste like chicken.
I have smelled my grandmother, which is very weird because my grandmother and I were not particularly close. And I feel like if she's still kicking around and has the ability to do things, she probably wouldn't come just waft her scent towards me, but I have smelled her in places that there's no reason I should have smelled.
Right.
So, yeah. Anyway, okay. There's one other specific place I want to ask you about because there was one description in the guide that when I read it, it gave me a little bit of chills. It is on page 15, is the Widow Susan Road in Amsterdam. So that's in the greater capital district, Albany area. Just the name of it alone is so scary, and I feel like that's such a canonical scary scenario that you're driving down a dark road. So can you tell me a little bit about the Widow Susan Road?
I have driven up and down that road. It is literally a hill. So you get down to the bottom of it, there's train tracks and another street. You have to turn around, go back up the hill, and it's a literal winding road. And there is one of those county signs that denote this is Widow Susan Road because of this woman who is wandering it looking for her family. She got married. They passed. She became a widow. And when she passed, she wasn't buried with the rest of the family. Reasons unknown, she was put somewhere else. I even went to her gravesite. And yes, there are other people from that side of the family, but she's not with her husband. She's not with those people she wants to be with. So the legend says that she's going to continue to walk that road until she finds them and finds out why she's not with them. So whether she gets reunited here on our plane or in the next, that's a story that's still being told.
Ooh, that's an eerie one. That's and also sad. So, all right. So there's a whole map in here. There's a trip planner. What's the best way for people to figure out how to hit the road and see some of the haunted places? Is this guide the easiest way? Are there some online tools for planning a
Yes.
trip?
There's a website, hauntedhistorytrail.com. That's where you get the brochure from. They also advertise events in New York State. I did an event earlier this year in Fonda back in September where we did a workshop where they teach you how to research plots of land to see who lived there, what was built there, to track down, okay, well, who's haunting this place? Who could it be? Is there any truth to that? And then we did a ghost hunt, of course, and it was pretty cool. So any events that are going on in New York State can be found on that website. But if you have the brochure, pick a region. Go look at they're all numbered, and just figure out a weekend. Okay, let's hit A, B, and C, and then have an adventure for later on in another area. And honestly, those are just the ones that are highlighted. So there's lots of different places in every village and town and city across New York State that have interesting things. So have a little bit of haunts, a little bit of history, and then discover something new for yourself.
Yeah. So there's a lot of ground to cover. New York is a big state, and this really does a good job of touching on really all of the regions. So I'm always down for a road trip. So if somebody wants to hang out with you, do you have any things coming up in New York or nearby where they can hang with you and do some ghost hunting?
I'm hoping to continue my pseudo residency up at Fort William Henry doing ghost tours. Those are still to be determined. In the New England area right now, I do have an event that's coming up in November. November 23rd, I'm going to be at the Middleborough Town Hall with Steve Gonzalez of Ghost Hunters, and we're calling it the Paranormal Town Hall. And we invite everyone to come. This is a winning ticket. Gonzalez and Cano. We're gonna set the paranormal straight. We're gonna get it back on track.
Nice.
And we just want to have people to have a lot of fun. So definitely come down and check that out.
do I need any special equipment? Because just to be clear, we were talking about EVP earlier. This is not something you're going to hear with your ear. You're going to hear this with recording equipment. And if you watch these shows, and you're on many of these shows, and I watch all the ones on the Discovery Channel, there's a lot of equipment that comes with this kind of ghost hunting stuff. Do I need anything? Is just as an amateur, I want to come hang out with you and Steve. You're going to talk. We're going to meet and greet. We're going to go hunt for some ghosts. Is there something that I should bring with me to help me experience the phenomenon?
Bring yourself, your five senses, and an open mind. The equipment is ancillary. It's pretty much they're training wheels for those who can't readily see it. Maybe it's just something a little extra. And obviously for EVP, yeah, you would need a little digital recorder. But just a couple of weekends ago, back up at the fort, we heard what's called an audible. So during an EVP session, we're asking questions, and I forget exactly what the question was. I think it was like, did you come with someone, or did you come here often? And we heard from the other end of the room, sure. And everybody looked around. We're like, okay, you didn't say that. You didn't say that. We heard something, right? It was loud enough to be heard, still very low. But when we played it back on the recorder, it was like a shout, like, sure. Okay. Yeah. So all you need is yourself. And I feel like for the skeptics, the equipment helps, because sometimes you can't trust your eyes, you can't trust your ears, senses can be deceived.
Yeah.
But if it's on a recorder, or if there's a REM pod that goes off or something else, and that's the thing, you can come to these events and we'll show you these gadgets. We'll show you how to use them. So all you need to bring is yourself and an open mind.
Yeah, I love the REM pod. Can you tell people what that is if they don't watch the Travel Channel
REM
constantly?
pod's a radiating energy module. It looks like a bomb, so TSA hates it. I always get selected for additional random
Oh, you
screening when I
must be
have it in my bag.
fun going through airport security. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I get pulled aside for the random screening, and then they look at me, they look down in the bag and they're like, "Oh, you're that guy." I'm like, "Yes, I'm that guy, and I got a plane to catch, so let's move it along."
Ah, that's funny. All right, so it's Halloween. You've been all over the country doing this, not just New York. So tell us one scary story of an experience that you've had that you will never forget. One of the ones that was more than just a single grain of sand.
I've been to many corners of this planet, to different countries, to different continents, and probably the answer to that, usually people ask me, what's the scariest experience? What's the most profound experience? Any of those favorite questions that I have a hard time answering, it comes down to a place called the Grand Midway Hotel in Windber, Pennsylvania. And I wrote about this in my book. It's called chapter 7. It's called The Circle of Fire.
I have this book,
And
by the way.
this was the one and only case in 22 years that I've had that had something to do with possibly the demonic. Now on TV, every week is something demon, but in real life, it's rare, and
that's scary.
thankfully so. And if I never have another case like that, it'll be too soon. But that being said, despite all that was experienced and felt, seen and heard on that case, as with so many other places, I'm now good friends with the owner. I've been back there many, many times. In 2016, we landed in the Guinness Book of World Records for painting the world's largest Ouija board on the roof of that hotel.
That's awesome.
You probably go on Google Maps and see it.
I'm going to do that as soon as we get off, because that's awesome. So I love that every place you go, you become friends with the owners, because it is our rule on the Valley Girls podcast that everybody who comes on the podcast is now our friend. And so, like I said, we have our other show, Literary Hudson Valley. And so I have your book here, Grains of Sand, Tales of a Paranormal Life. So I'm going to have to ask you to come back at a different time so we can talk on Literary Hudson Valley in depth about the book and the stories you tell in the book. Maybe I can even find my other spooky season lovers, and we can make a book club out of it, and people can ask questions. So
that sounds great.
I can talk about books all day, every day. And so that's why Jenny was like, just get your own show. Just go talk about books on the other show. So this has been a lot of fun. Anything else you want people to know about the Haunted History Trail of New York as we celebrate this Halloween?
I just think it's a great idea. Again, kudos to Kelly for starting it. And again, I'm a New Yorker. I take pride in my state and I love being the ambassador for it. But I also feel like I would love to do this for every state, and
Mm.
then every country, and then the world. So I think I'm going to take over. Eventually, you wait.
So I really like talking to you. We are going to ask you to come back and talk more about the book. And I'm super grateful to Kelly for the brainchild and to you for being the ambassador for the Haunted History Trail of New York State. We are so lucky to have all this creepy history.
Cool. Thanks for having me. It was a great chat. It went so quickly.
I know, but I know it's 43 minutes. Went by just like that. Who knows? Maybe there's some paranormal time compression
Dilation.
phenomenon. Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much. And we'll chat again about your book.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you again to Jonathan Joel for the sinister music on this episode. Remember, links to the song and Jen's video interview with Jonathan are in the show notes and on the episode page of our website, valleygirlspodcast.com. Hope you all have a scary good Halloween. We've got another episode coming up in just 1 week. And while Halloween may be over by then, we have more treats up our sleeve, so you do not want to miss it. Thank you to everyone for listening. Please like and subscribe, rate and review. It all helps tremendously. Do you love the Valley Girls? Tell a friend. Have ideas for the podcast? Tell us. The easiest way to chat with us is our Facebook group, Valley Girls Podcast Pod Squad, or you can contact us through our website, valleygirlspodcast.com, where you can also sign up for our newsletter so you never miss a thing. And of course, we're on Instagram at ValleyGirlsPodNY. We can't wait to hear from you. Bye for now.